Hello there, this is Elena in my channel Enough. Today I will use the interview of Mr. Rosenberg from BBC, interview with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and I will use it as an example how it's supposed to be done. You can watch one of my videos about Soviet propaganda, and in this video you will see the techniques which Soviet propagandists using, and Mr. Lavrov in this interview and in general, he is not acting like a diplomat. He is not acting like a journalist in any way. He is a propagandist. As I explained in my video about propaganda, in USSR and in Russia, there are professional propagandists. These people study in universities to become one. They study in high school of KGB, they study in high school of Communist Party of USSR, and even if I deeply respect the job Mr. Rosenberg did, I understand that he is a good journalist and he is thinking that he is doing a good job by talking to a diplomat from Russia, a minister of foreign affairs of Russia, but in fact Rosenberg is talking to Russian propagandists, of even Soviet propagandists, I would say. That is why you cannot talk to Russian Soviet propagandists like that, because the appearance for the viewers, especially in Russia, is that British journalist is weak, that Britain is wrong about something, and Lavrov is right, which isn't true. That is why I decided to use this video and show you how it was done to Mr. Rosenberg by Lavrov, and how it should be done to Lavrov. You cannot treat him the same way as you interviewing, let's say, any American or British or person from any other free world country, a diplomat or a journalist. Then you're supposed to acting like a journalist, you're supposed to ask questions and expecting to get results. In this case, let's see what happens.
Нашли время побеседовать. Хочу вас спросить, перед тем, как президент Путин принял решение и объявил о начале специальной военной операции, как он ее называет, он посоветовался...
As you can clearly see, the British journalist in the beginning of the interview, actually, Mr. Rosenberg said that he's thinking that Mr. Lavrov will answer his questions. Good luck with that idea. This is the question number 1. First minute of the interview. You can see it written on the screen, and Mr. Rosenberg implying that before starting a war, the president of the country probably would talk to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, one would think. And let's see what Mr. Lavrov is answering.
Стоит ли это делать или нет?
Вы знаете, вообще механизм принятия решений существует в каждом государстве, и в данном случае тот механизм, который в Российской Федерации сложился, полностью был задействован.
Но он посоветовался у вас?
Я вам еще раз объясняю, что есть какие-то вещи, о которых мы публично не говорим, есть механизм принятия решений, и этот механизм был полностью соблюден.
Просто я спрашиваю, потому что вы...
What we can clearly see here, that on the first minutes of the interview, Lavrov is already evasive. He trying to avoid the question. We can only guess why is that. Partly because he doesn't want sanctions on him for starting such a war. Russia can call it whatever they want, special operation, very special operation. It's a war. It's a bloody war where the thousands, dozens of thousands of Russians died already in this war. Many Ukrainians died, millions of Ukrainians fled the country, and that war started Russia. Again, Russia didn't start that war in 2022, in February, no. The war started in 2014. And here Mr. Lavrov is kind of avoiding the question. He didn't say, yes, Putin talked to me, or no, Putin didn't talk to me. Also, it may be partly because many people, well, not many people actually close to Putin these days. According to the information and people who were invited by the channel Popular Politics, this channel created by the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. They invited lots of guests, and some of them like experts of different kind, and some of them are close to people who close to Putin, used to be anyways. They're saying that not many people close to Putin these days, and actually not many people, important people in Russia, even knew that the war gonna start. The Putin decided to start the war. He decided it basically by himself. So I wouldn't be very surprised that Minister of Foreign Affairs didn't even know that the war is gonna start. But highly likely that he did. It means Mr. Lavrov is co-conspirator, basically. He is as guilty in this war, just being a Minister of Foreign Affairs, as Putin. Yet, he prefer not to answer the question. He prefer to avoid it. So the first question he's already avoiding. And let's see what happens next.
Вы очень опытный журналист, хорошо знакомы с реалиями и в России, и вокруг России, на постсоветском пространстве. У вас в этом вопросе звучит желание отменить все.
As you can clearly see, just 2 minutes into interview, and Mr. Lavrov is already using Soviet propaganda technique. It's called Whataboutism. He not only dodged the first question, he's trying to completely drive the discussion in drive the interview into different area. And what cancel culture he talking about? Who cancel Russian culture? I live in Canada. I don't see Russian culture cancelled. I just came from the trip to United States for 30 days. I didn't see cancel culture there. Where I saw cancel Russian culture is in Russia, when they forbid anybody who is against Putin or not yelling, I support the war, to be represented. There are exhibitions of the artists closed, forbidden, just because they're not supporting Putin and Putin's war. Only musicians who can have a concert in Russia, it's the people who support the war. Everybody else cancelled. So Mr. Lavrov talking about Russia cancelling its own culture and somehow blaming the West about that? Good one.
Culture, отменить все, что было до 24 февраля.
And now Mr. Lavrov trying to say that whatever was before 24th of February 2022 somehow cancelled. It's a good question, by the way. How the war even started? Yes, the war in Ukraine started not in the February of this year. It started in 2014. Basically, at this point in the interview, Lavrov interrupted Mr. Rosenberg and took charge of the interview. In such situation, in my opinion, Mr. Rosenberg should first catch Mr. Lavrov on using manipulative tactic and say, "Excuse me, sir, but you using against me Soviet propagandist tactic whataboutism. Would you please stop doing that and answer my question?" If Mr. Lavrov wants to talk about 2014, Wonderful. He doesn't know. Mr. Lavrov thinking that people in other countries don't know what happened there. He very much mistaken. I personally was really interested about what happening, and I was watching very closely everything, and not just official news. I was watching lots of public videos, private videos, filmed by their cell phones. I personally watched over 30 hours of private videos filmed during Maidan revolution, Euromaidan, and I could say that what happened exactly in Ukraine at the time. Ukraine was attacked by Russia. It started, actually began in 2014 with the illegal annexation of Crimea to the Russian Federation. The invasion into territory of Donbass and the creating of two illegal states there, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, which this interview they will talk about it a little later. And Ukraine in 1994 used to be the third largest nuclear weapons stockpile. Under the agreement of December 5th, 1994, which was signed by leaders of Ukraine, Russia, Great Britain, and the United States, they signed the Memorandum of Security Assurances. And under this agreement, Ukraine transferred the world's third largest nuclear weapons stockpile to Russia in exchange for commitment by Russia, Britain, and the United States to respect the independence, sovereignty, and existing borders of Ukraine. And all four countries signed this agreement, and even Putin agreed with this. I either give you a link or I'll show you his speech during his interview to German channel ADR or ARD. And Putin in that interview claimed that he agreed with the borders of Ukraine that existed at the time, and that these borders would not be revised. Then in 2014, Putin brought insignialess troops and seized Crimea and territories in the Donbass. It was aggression and a gross violation of the norms of international law. And now would be a good time, Mr. Rosenberg, to ask Mr. Lavrov about that. If Mr. Lavrov so insisting of remembering what was happened before February 24 of this year, would be very nicely to remember why Russia broke the international agreement, which was signed by Russia and accepted by Putin. Putin was saying that they're not going to revise the borders of Ukraine, and the Crimea belonged to Ukraine in his interview. So why is that? I personally tracked information from many different sources at the time, watched dozens of hours of private videos and compared them. It was though the example of that war that I realized exactly how we were lied to and brainwashed in the USSR. Putin has not invented anything new, and he used the classic techniques of the USSR: falsification of data, intimidation of the population, whataboutism, demagogy, and many other manipulative tactics. My investigation showed me that Russia lied the most then, up to and including outright falsifications. And Russia is still lying, as you can see and you will see in this particular interview. And let's see what Mr. Lavrov has to say now.
Хотел уточнить просто ваш роль.
Все 8 лет с участием наших специальных служб, с участием Министерства иностранных дел, с участием Министерства обороны мы продвигали необходимость выполнить Минские договоренности, которые были одобрены Советом.
Now Mr. Lavrov remembering about Minsk agreements. Good one. If Russia wouldn't broke the Budapest agreement, which was signed, as I said, in 1994, there would be no need of Minsk agreements. Ukraine would be having its territory intact. There would be no Russian Crimea, there would be no the so-called Donetsk-Lugansk republics at all. In Donetsk and Lugansk republics, and so is in the Crimea, for you know, it was Russian, either insignialess troops like in Crimea, who came, pretended they are not Russian, and then Putin admitted that they were Russians, and they took territory of Crimea. Nobody was killed in Crimea. Nobody wanted to be part of Russia in Crimea. How do I know that? Because there were polls done at the time. And at the time, people of Crimea wanted to be a part of Ukraine. They wanted to be autonomy inside Ukraine. Until Russian insignialess troops came, they started to build a border between Ukraine and Russia. Before the referendum, even the referendum was fake, but even before that, about 3 days before the referendum, they started to build a fence on the border between Ukraine and Russia. Between Ukraine and Crimea, sorry. And also, what they were doing, they were stopped operating Ukrainian TV on the territory of Crimea and started to show them Russian TV, where they were saying, Nazis coming, they're gonna kill you. There were no Ukrainian forces coming to Crimea. Nobody shoot anybody in Crimea. Nothing was happening. Russia just grabbed it, pretended it had a referendum, and made it part of Russia. That's what happened in Crimea. About Donetsk-Lugansk republics, the same thing. Some bandits from Russia, leading by Russia, by KGB, personally by Mr. Girkin, his pseudonym is Strelkov, and now he's wanted by Interpol, who was KGB officer, and I'll provide information in the description of this video about the guy. He was the leader of Donetsk Republic. He was involved with Crimea, he was involved with everything else. So basically KGB people brought a few bandits, taught a few people in Ukraine how to act, give them weapons, taught them that they should go and sit in the government buildings and so on. So it was invasion of Russia into independent country of Ukraine. That's how it all happened. Yet Ukrainian government did not kill them, did not bomb them, they didn't bring army into Donetsk and Lugansk at the time. It was before those so-called republics were formed. And basically, that's what happened. What Putin did in Chechnya. When Chechen Republic wanted to come out of, wanted to separate from Russia. For over 10 years, there was bloody war in Chechnya, and Putin was bombing to the ground the capital of Chechnya, Grozny. During 2 weeks at the time, he was bombing them 55,000 shells and bombs a day. He ruined the city, leveled the city. And that two Chechen wars together was over 10 years going on in Russia. That's how Putin responded for the rights of nations to self-determination. Ukraine didn't do that. Ukraine allowed those bandits who occupied government buildings form two so-called republics, Donetsk and Lugansk republics. That's exactly what happened in Ukraine. And if you will verify information I'm giving you, you will find exactly the same thing what I did. But apparently the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Mr. Lavrov, doesn't know that. How interesting. And now he's talking about that Ukraine, with a gun to their head, supposed to fulfill Minsk agreements.
Безопасности ООН единогласно. На протяжении этих 8 лет мы добивались того, чтобы Донецк и Луганск, которые изначально, как вы помните, в 2014 году в ответ...
Another interesting saying. He talking about the same republics. I just explained you how they were formed. Now he claiming that there was neo-Nazi uprising in Kiev in 2014. That is a lie as well. Why? What Nazis, first of all? What Nazis in Ukraine? If you will verify what I'm saying, Ultra-right party. There are ultra-right parties basically in every country, and in Ukraine as well. Ukraine had 2 free elections, not the ones like in Crimea. It was a referendum, so-called referendum, when the insignialist troops were standing in the polls with the people voting in the voting places with the machine guns on their necks. There were free elections in Ukraine, and both ultra-right parties combined didn't even make 2%. Neither in 2014 nor in 2019. So what Nazis? If there were no Nazis, there were neo-Nazi uprising. About the so-called uprising. Sorry, I have to talk too much about that because people need to understand what actually happened. What actually happened in Ukraine at the time of leading by President Yanukovych, all that the people of Ukraine wanted at the time was to sign the association agreement between Ukraine and European Union. Let me note, Ukraine was not going to be admitted to European Union at the time because of the high level of corruption. It was just about cooperation. There were no decisions on Ukraine's accession into EU, NATO, or the closure of Russian military base in Sevastopol. There was no talk about this, as far as I know from the media and from many countries. Why would Ukraine want to join NATO at the time? Nobody was bombed in 2013. Nobody was bombed before Russia attacked Ukraine and grabbed Crimea in those 2 republics. Nothing was happening. Ukraine wouldn't even dream that they would have one-day war with Russia. They wouldn't even see it in a nightmare. So Ukraine wasn't even talking about joining NATO. They couldn't join European Union. All they wanted is to sign the association agreement. That's all. Why did Ukrainians want to develop relations with European Union and in the future possibly join the organization? It was because almost all the former Warsaw Pact countries that joined the European Union have dramatically improved their economic performance. For example, a comparison of life in Hungary versus life in Ukraine certainly didn't favor Ukraine. People always want a better life for themselves and their children. That is why when President Yanukovych, who was the president of Ukraine at the time, refused to conclude an agreement with the European Union, the Ukrainians realized that they and their children were being deprived of a better future. They protested at Maidan Nezalezhnosti, Independence Square in Kiev. And actually Yanukovych, the president of Ukraine at the time, he went right before he cancelled that agreement, which was approved by Ukrainian parliament, which was just about ready to be signed. Yanukovych went to Russia. He talked to Putin. He come back and said he's not going to sign that agreement. Ukrainians protested against him and against his corrupted government. And then what happened? There started to be protests, peaceful protests, by the way, until the police forces of Ukraine started to shoot at people. They killed over 100 protesters and about more than 10 policemen. So Yanukovych eventually had to sign agreement with the Russian with opposition leaders, and the same day he ran away. He ran away to Russia. He left his country. He left the people who voted for him. He ran and left Ukraine without president. Of course, Ukraine didn't sit and cry. They elected a new government, a new president. That's what happened. So there was no neo-Nazi uprising. It was people of Ukraine who was against Yanukovych and his corrupted oligarchs, and they wanted the agreement with Europe, which Yanukovych said, no, it's not going to happen. That's what happened in Ukraine at the time in 2014, before the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, before the grabbing Crimea and those Donetsk-Lugansk republics. That's how it all started. Putin get afraid that Ukraine gonna improve its life and send a message to Russia that Russians also can have a uprising against authority. And how do I know he was afraid? Because right after that he passed a whole bunch of laws, over 17 I believe, different laws, which is restricting the Russians' freedoms in many ways, which was saying that people will go for 5 years to jail for talking about separating parts of Russia. So when he was grabbing Crimea and separating parts of Ukraine, that was okay. But if you're talking about separating parts of Russia, you're going in jail for 5 years. At the time was passed the law about extremism, which for extremism in internet, you're also getting 5 years in jail. Yet they didn't explain what extremism is. They didn't explain nothing. It means anybody could be arrested according to this law just because they thinking you're extremist in internet. 17 laws, even more than that, Putin passed at the time, right after what happened on Maidan in Ukraine. It's only saying that he was afraid, very afraid.
Ответ на неонацистский госпереворот в Киеве объявили свою независимость, мы их убедили подписать Минские договоренности, которые гарантировали территориальную целостность и суверенитет.
So it is very interesting that Mr. Lavrov right now is pretending that the lie Russia created is known and accepted by the world, which isn't so. People know what I just explained you. And now, all of a sudden, Mr. Lavrov is wondering about persuasion with Minsk agreements. I cannot say that if somebody put gun to your head and then ask you to sign something, it's called persuasion. I believe it's called a threat. And now Mr. Lavrov is worried about territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. Why didn't he worry about that when Russia broke a Budapest agreement I told you about? Why it didn't happen then? Russia had no problem to break Budapest agreement. Russia had no problem to grab the territories of Ukraine, which is Donetsk and Lugansk republics, and Crimea. And now all of a sudden he's so worried about territorial integrity. And again, Mr. Lavrov is lying again. Surprise, surprise. Why? It's because Russia did not use international and world accepted ways to deal with international problems. I'll probably tell you about it a little later.
Когда сейчас господин Шольц заявляет, что украинскую территориальную целостность государства.
Но ситуация поменялась 4 месяца назад, то есть уже 4
Mr. Lavrov is also saying that now international leaders trying to make Russia talk to Ukraine and sign some sort of agreements. In my opinion, these agreements could have worked if it would be just the beginning of the war, the first few days. Right now is way too late. But again, it's not my interview, so I'll talk about it some other time.
Ситуация не поменялась. Мы возвращаемся к тому, ради чего были согласованы Минские договоренности. Защита русских на Донбассе.
Oh, wonderful. He was talking about protecting Russian people on Donbass. When they was bombing Mariupol into the ground, it was primarily Russian-speaking city. You can see on my website what the writers from Ukraine, Russian-speaking writers, saying about the first day of the war. Russia was bombing civilians, leveling Mariupol, leveling Kharkiv. It's all mostly Russian-speaking cities. Yet Russia had no problem bombing them to the ground, and that is why it's useless to talk to them. They're lying all the time. Putin lying, Lavrov is lying, they're saying they will give humanitarian corridors, and then they're shooting people there. It was done before, and catching Mr. Lavrov on those lies, that would be the duty of the journalist. He would be supposed to be the one who should say, don't use manipulative tactics with me, don't use whataboutism. And why are we talking about Minsk agreements right now? Because Mr. Lavrov decided to talk about. Why are we not talking that Russia started the war in Ukraine in 2014? Before that war, nothing was happening. Nobody was bombing anyone. And Ukraine is an independent country. It's up to Ukraine to choose what language to use. It's up to Ukraine to choose what to do inside the country. It's not up to Russia to decide, or anybody else.
Которых предали и французы, и немцы. Ну, англичане, конечно, это были тоже в первых рядах, потому что все западные наши коллеги говорили, ну не можем мы заставлять Минск выполнить эти Киев.
Of course they cannot.
Защита русских на Донбассе, да? Но почему за эти 4 месяца после начала специальной военной операции погибло больше мирных жителей на территории так называемой ДНР, ЛНР, чем за весь прошлый год?
Вы тоже смотрели, наверное...
That's a great question, by the way. And I can totally agree with that. And I will show you the facts, which was a report from United Nations, how many people died during those 8 years, from 2014 until now. And the biggest amount died in 2014 and 2015, as you will see. And the least amount, 25 people died in 2021. And right now, Mr. Putin is so upset about killings there that he had to start a war, which killed way more people, and I don't know, over 5 million Ukrainians already left the country. This is just outrageous. The lies Mr. Lavrov saying is outrageous. Yet, just because of the politeness and manners of the BBC journalist, even I read some comments to this video. Some people thinking that Lavrov is doing a great job. And these people supposed to be from foreign countries, I can say where they're actually from. It may be Russian trolls, which most likely. But this is just disgusting. This is just disgusting to watch this guy who is lying to people and doesn't even change in his face. This is disgusting. Here's the information I was telling you about. This is the report of United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner from 27th of January 2022 about conflict-related civilian casualties in Ukraine. And on the page 3, you're welcome to see the graphs and information about 2,084 people died and was killed of civilians in 2014, 955 2015, 25 2021. That was upset Putin so much that he decided to start a war. I'll give a link to this report. You're welcome to check it out.
Репортажи немецкого телевидения, АРД и французского канала основного, которые тут на днях заявили, что в результате бомбардировок со стороны российских вооруженных сил был атакован родильный дом в Донецке, рынок, где были убиты десятки мирных жителей. Они сказали, что
yes, we saw it.
Ничтоже сумняшество.
Of course Russian forces did it, because they did it. And the whole world know about that. Yet Mr. Lavrov trying to deny it. It's unbelievable. Russian people who listen in Russian TV and being brainwashed for many years can believe in this garbage I don't see why people from free world who can get information from anywhere they want would possibly even think that Ukraine gonna all of a sudden bomb their own people for no reason whatsoever. Like, would you do it to your neighbors? Depends where you live. Like, would you destroy, I don't know, big chunk of your city or level it, ruin it, just to say Russia did it? I wouldn't. I wouldn't do it to my neighbors in Canada. I don't think anybody would. Yet in the mind of brainwashed Russian people who believe that there are Nazis in Ukraine, which there are no Nazis in Ukraine as far as I just explained you why, they thinking that it's okay, that this is what's happening. And the question is, if the Ukrainian government was so much Nazis, why they didn't do it earlier? Why they didn't shoot people in Donetsk, future Donetsk and Lugansk territories, when they were just sitting without too much weapons even in the government buildings? Why is that? And why all of a sudden now Ukraine bombing its own territory and destroying it completely? How do they think they're gonna live with these people after that? It's their territory. How stupid need to be to believe in this garbage what Mr. Lavrov is saying? Yes, the Kramatorsk station was bombed by Russians, and the people who was trying to escape, it was bombed by Russians, and the people who were trying to escape the city, they were dying in there. And now probably would be a good time to tell Mr. Lavrov that where are the proofs? Where are any proofs of anything what he says? Yeah, right.
Объясните мне просто одну вещь. В прошлом году на территории ЛНР, ДНР погибло 8 мирных жителей. В позапрошлом году погибло 7 мирных жителей. Одна смерть – это трагедия. Безусловно. Но это не геноцид, о котором часто говорят чиновники в России. Вот объясните мне, пожалуйста, учитывая эти цифры, как вы можете сказать, что это разумное решение было вторгаться в Украину?
Знаете, мы не вторгались в Украину. Мы...
Oh yeah, that's a brilliant phrase. We didn't invade Ukraine, we declared a special military operation. What kind of special military operation? For over 100, almost like 118 or 19 days, maybe even 120 today. Depends on the time. I'm in Canada, in Russia, it's already next day. What kind of special military operation? Anybody have right to do in another country? Killing their people, killing the civilians, killing their military personnel. Every one of you who can watch any possible news, you would see what a destruction happened in Ukraine. You would see that column of Russian tanks lining up kilometers on the road. You would see bomb to the ground cities. You would see dead people and dead civilians in Bucha. In many other places, you don't know how many of them killed in Mariupol. That city have not even water yet, because it's all plugged with dead bodies. It's all destroyed. And that not called invasion? That's outer lie. Sorry, I can't be very patient and I can't be calm, because this is a lie. Wonderful. Now let's blame the West? This is just insane. To tell you the truth, NATO were reducing forces in Europe. Reducing forces. Very significantly. In the link to this video, I'll provide you exact numbers. How much every country was reducing its forces in Europe. In 2013-2014, there was plans for 2015 to reduce forces of NATO. What criminal act? Who was dragging Ukraine in the NATO? As I say, Ukraine wasn't even thinking of joining NATO. That wasn't necessary for Ukraine in any way. So it doesn't make sense at all, whatever Lavrov is saying. And now would be a good question to ask, where are any proofs? How many NATO troops was in Europe in 2013, before the war in Ukraine started? Very little. There are hardly any tanks left in Europe at the time. These are facts. NATO is an organization. It has reports. It has open information. Anybody from free country and even from Russia can go and read about that. Yet Mr. Lavrov is thinking that we are all here stupid, that we're not gonna go and verify this information. The Wall Street Journal has an article about that, about reducing NATO forces in Europe. Yet thanks to Putin and attack Ukraine, many countries now want to join NATO. Sweden and Finland, who never wanted to join NATO, never was NATO countries, now wanted to join NATO all of a sudden. Even Sweden, who didn't do it during World War II. And that's all Russian doing. The minister from Finland, or prime minister, the leader of Finland, was saying exactly that, thanks to Putin. That's I want that my country join NATO. So there is no dragging Ukraine anywhere. Why would anybody need Ukraine in NATO? So it's not a criminal act, it's another lie of Lavrov.
Втягивая Украину в НАТО, лелея и опекая и всячески пестуя.
Another lie. The West was supporting and nurturing an openly neo-Nazi regime. Where did you see that? Where is shred of a proof? Even if you open Wikipedia, English version of it at least, you will see what percentage which party in Ukraine got in any election. You don't even have to dig very deep. I dig deeper than that. But even in English-speaking Wikipedia, it says there is no Nazis in Ukraine. So I really would like to see the proofs from Mr. Lavrov of anything he says, because there are none so far. I have, on the contrary, proofs that it's otherwise. Okay, it's all a lie, as you can clearly see right now.
Откровенно неонацистский режим, чей президент заявил еще в сентябре прошлого года, вы нам не сообщали об этом своим зрителям, он заявил, что если кто-то на Украине чувствует себя как русский человек, пусть уезжает.
And I personally don't see what's wrong with that. These people, even if President Zelensky say that, which I'm not sure about, because Russia lies so much, and they throw so much false information into the world, I really tired of checking and verifying every little thing. But, sorry for my not perfect English, I really apologize for that. I think there is a word, impatriot, or something like that. It means the people who live in the country, but they not become part of the country. They may be citizens by the paper, but they don't support this country, they don't want to live in this country, they doing harmful stuff for the country. Well, in every free country, people can live where they want. I live in Canada. Canada doesn't have a gun to my head and say, you stay in Canada. If I choose to go to Australia, Russia, England, anywhere, I can. I know Canadians who came here from UK and then they get back home. I know Canadians who went to live in Australia. Nobody holding gun to anybody's head. If you don't like the country, you're welcome to come back to the country you came from. There is no problem with that in any democratic country whatsoever.
Он это публично сказал. Когда ему корреспондент CNN заявил, что вот этот самый полк Азов был внесен в некоторых западных странах и в США в свое время, и в Японии в список экстремистских, террористических, Он пожал плечами, Зеленский, и сказал, ну, у нас таких батальонов много и полков. Они такие, какие они есть.
Давайте посмотрим последствия. Вот прошло 4 месяца.
Okay, about Azov. It's not Russian problem, is it? Polk Azov was defending Mariupol inside Ukraine, in their own country, from Russian invaders. Right now, Russians kidnapped the people from Azov battalion, brought them to Russia, make them somehow war criminals in some way by defending the city in their country, doing their duty, and now they're trying to create out of them something what they are not.
Миллионов украинцев вынуждены были покинуть свои дома, значительные потери российских войск, куча санкций против России. Вы до сих пор считаете, что это правильное решение?
Я вам еще скажу, у нас не было иного выхода. Многократно.
Oh, brilliant from Russia. We explained 1,000 times that they didn't have other choice, that we didn't have other choice. It's another propagandist tactics. If you repeat something 1,000 times, it doesn't make it true, Mr. Lavrov. That's what had to be said. It's not true. As I just explained, there was absolutely no reason to attack Ukraine whatsoever, beside Putin's ambition and nothing else. And Putin's wish to stay in power. That's why he decided if he invade Ukraine, Russian people will forget about the poor economics and that Putin didn't do anything for Russia and might remove him from power. And he will not stop because he's corrupted leader, a dictator, and his money is in the hands of his oligarchs, quite a bit of that money. So for him, he can just leave like American president. When somebody else get elected, they just leave. Putin may get murdered. That is why he needs something to stay in power, and he needs this war. So there was no reason, as I said, for this war whatsoever. Nobody was bombing Ukraine, nobody was killing Russians, nothing. Or Ukrainians, or anybody. It was Putin's choice back then in 2014, and now in February 24th of 2022.
Тысячу раз мы все это объясняли. То, что сейчас вашим оружием, западным оружием, украинским...
Oh boy, now he started to lie again. I can't even move past 10 minutes yet. It's not even 10 minutes in the video. What Kiev regime is attacking peaceful civilians. Kiev regime didn't even kill the bandits who was taking power in Donetsk and Lugansk republics in 2014. And right now Russia invaded Ukraine, killing Ukrainian people, and Ukrainian government defending its country. And by the way, the West didn't give Ukraine weapons until it was the way in the first months into the war. They started to give them javelins or something like that. They still didn't give them enough weapons. Yet Lavrov lying again.
Атакует мирных граждан.
And again, in 2014, there was no Western weapons in Ukraine, period. There was no even now when the war started again in February 24th. If Ukraine would have had Western weapons, Russia would have been kicked out of Ukraine way earlier. The problem is they did not have that weapons. That is why sometimes civilians died, because Ukraine and Russia has old Soviet weapons. They don't have precision weapons which Western countries has, which can, let's say, destroy the electric stove within an apartment. Russian weapons would destroy the whole apartment building and a half of block with it, of the buildings. So, if Russia didn't attack Ukraine in 2014, nothing would have happened. And there are not even close to be enough Western weapons in Ukraine. And that is a lie as well. Sorry, I'm trying to skip a little bit, but I guess it doesn't work very well.
многократно, 1000 раз мы все это объясняли. То, что сейчас вашим оружием, западным оружием, украинский режим атакует...
No, they're attacking more civilians or Ukrainians more than Russia did by invading Ukraine. And they didn't do it in 2014. Otherwise, there would be no republics of Donetsk or Lugansk. And about people in Odessa, there is again a report of United Nations. And I was watching the news feed from private people who was filming what happened in Odessa. In Odessa, there were Russian instigators, which was recognized by people from Odessa because they wasn't looking like people who live there. They were talking on walkie-talkies and they was deciding which building to take. And some of them throw Molotov cocktail out of the building and it happened to blow up inside the building. That's how the fire started. And people who died there, it's a tragedy. But if there wouldn't be the Russian instigators who trying to make an Odessa another Lugansk and Donetsk, nothing most likely would have happened. Either people would have peaceful protests or nothing would have happened. Besides, the world using international ways, legal ways to deal with conflicts. Everybody does, and it's worked for many countries very well and successful. According to Russian journalist Nevzorov, Russia didn't even apply to United Nations with any problems whatsoever, and when they were offered to, they declined. And Russian politician Valentina Matvienko, who was so pro this war, she personally said, we don't need help of United Nations. There is no problem in Donetsk and Lugansk republics. So when now they're bringing up what happened during these 8 years and how horrible it all was, it wasn't horrible enough that Russia didn't apply to United Nations and refused help from United Nations. Why is that, Mr. Lavrov? Why Russia refused use United Nations in legal ways? Why Russia chose to attack Ukraine instead? That's a good question. I wish to know the answer.
Не напали бы, не было бы оружия с Запада.
That's a very good point, Mr.
Нападали на русских на Украине.
Steve.
Представьте себе, вот вы англичане, так я понимаю.
Я вам называл цифры. Я называл цифры. 8 погибших в прошлом году.
Я вам объясняю, что украинский режим бомбит свое собственное.
That's a total lie. Otherwise, why wouldn't Kiev regime didn't bomb it in 2014? Why he didn't bomb Donetsk and Lugansk republics and get rid of those bandits who was taking charge in there? Why not? Why now, all of a sudden? When Russia invaded and started bombing Ukrainian cities, now all of a sudden they started to shell in their own citizens. It doesn't make any sense at all, whatsoever. Yeah, bad West. Giving Ukrainian chance to defend itself. Even without Western weapons, Russia couldn't capture Ukraine. So now what? Ukraine giving at least started to have a fair chance to defend itself. And now Lavrov talking about genocide. What genocide? 25 people died in 2021. That's called genocide?
Вы англичанин? Представьте себе, если бы в Ирландии, не в Северной Ирландии, а в Ирландской республике, запретили английский язык. Как бы себя англичане ощущали?
Ну точно не...
Well, every country can have their own languages. Canada has 2 of them. It's English and French. And it's absolutely nobody's business. And the United States cannot invade Canada just because they don't like that we have 2 official languages, not 3. Or not 1. It's internal business of a country. Nothing to do with genocide.
Не вторгались бы в Ирландию. И, кстати,
подождите,
русский язык не запрещен.
Это вас не унижало бы? Русский язык запрещен на Украине.
That's another lie. Russian language isn't banned in Ukraine. How do I know? First of all, I talking to Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. Many defenders of Ukraine don't even know Ukrainian language, but they don't want to be Russian. They are Ukrainian and they defending their country. And so is like we're watching sometimes some YouTube channels, travel channels, and so on. And one of them, I could give a link to this channel. Even now, when the war is going on, these people, he just visited Ukraine. He see all that bombings. He seen what Russians done. But he show around, and you can see the names of the stores in Russian. He talking to people. I know Russian. They speak in Russian back to him. He is in Ukraine. He was there a month or something like that ago. Nothing of Lavrov is saying is a true thing. He either cherry picking things to make it look like it, or he just bluntly lying. This is a lie. Ukrainian language, Russian language never was banned in Ukraine. It just Russian's not masters there anymore. So now it's language like everything else. Yet they do study it in school. But now they have a right to study their own language, Ukrainian. And even now, lots of Ukrainian people don't know Ukrainian. They speak Russian. They write in Russian, they speak Russian. And it's okay.
Попробуйте.
Что нельзя говорить на русском языке?
Попробуйте на улице в Киеве, когда там гуляют молодые люди определенной внешности, поговорить на русском языке. Попробуйте.
Почему вы считаете, что...
И факты. Вы же не... У вас вот вся ваша аналитика в прежнем оборонительном альянсе. И нам говорят, не волнуйтесь, вступление Украины в НАТО, нам так говорили.
And about NATO, there was a good question. Again, NATO is defensive alliance. Everybody knows that. And Mr. Rosenberg knows that. And Russia was so worried about Ukraine joining NATO. Why? I have been in United States. I have been in 42 states of United States. I drove through, I've been on their military bases, I've been in many, because there are lots of history museums in there. And there are history museums, there are planes museums and stuff like that. There are planes which can fly to Russia from the middle of United States and do there whatever they want. Throw flowers there, throw bombs, whatever they choose to, if they want to. But they don't need it. And the point of Ukraine being in NATO, it's ridiculous. Like, what do you do with Ukraine? You put the rockets in there, why don't you put it in Turkey? Or take a plane from the middle of United States, fly to Russia and do whatever you want. It's all stupid, scary stories like fairy tales, which people still believe that we're living in Stone Age, so to whack somebody on the head with a stone hammer, you have to come close to that person. It's stupid.
Будет создавать угрозы для Российской Федерации. При всем уважении к нашим коллегам из Североатлантического альянса, Россия имеет право самой.
Oh, wonderful. Russia has right to decide what is a threat to security and what isn't. So Russia can start war with anybody just because she feels her security there is a threat to its security? Unbelievable. This is unbelievable. And people watching this, I don't know how to say politely, so I keep my mouth shut about that. People watching it and they admiring that weasel of Russian minister of foreign affairs. He's saying one stupid thing after another. What, now it means that United States can invade Canada just because they don't like how Canadians treated one or two American citizens, which there are lots of Americans live in Canada or visit it often enough. If they get upset, what, they have rights to invade Canada and put their puppet to be Canadian Prime Minister? Or even funnier way, if Canada, lots of Canadians, snowbirds living in the United States for a long time, what if some of them get upset? So now Canada has rights to bring troops into United States and capture American president and exchange him on Canadian puppet? Because Canada feel that this is its threat for our security. It's just ridiculous.
Сама решать, что является для нее угрозой для ее безопасности, а что не является. Вы
Ну,
так не считаете?
смотрите, вот до аннексии Крыма, 2014 год, не было войск НАТО в Восточной Европе.
Я вам больше скажу, и аннексии Крыма-то не было.
Потом, в 2016 году, да, появились 4500, да, в результате аннексии Крыма. Потом в этом году, после 24 февраля, 40 тысяч. Но это в результате действия России.
Да потому что, слушайте, Стивен, ну вы же умный человек.
Я смотрю факты.
Brilliant question, Mr. Rosenberg. Exactly why? Yet Mr. Lavrov being condescending and trying to appear like he patting Mr. Rosenberg on the shoulder and said, yeah, you're a clever guy, but you're stupid. You don't know how things are. I'll tell you how it is. Oh, and he has different facts. Boy, oh boy, it's getting really annoying.
Это факты, конечно, безусловно. Я вам приведу другие факты. Вы же не... У вас вот вся ваша...
Wow. And now another whataboutism again. What it has to do with culture, and what it has to do with canceling anything.
Аналитика опирается на ту самую cancel culture, культура отмены. Вы отменяете все, что предшествовало тому событию, которое вы решаете назвать то вторжением, то аннексией.
Нет, абсолютно.
Что было 21 февраля 2000?
I can agree with Mr. Rosenberg in here again. And what happened on 21st of February 2014 in Ukraine? As I told you, on this day, President Yanukovych, after all what happened on the Maidan, after people get killed, eventually decided to sign an agreement with opposition leaders. And they did. But he was keep doing what he's doing. And at the same day, why don't you mention that, Mr. Lavrov, that President Yanukovych ran away? There was no reason for him to. At least nothing happened to him. He just ran. He ran to Russia. With like a dog to his master with his tail between his legs. And what? Ukraine was left without a president. What coup? What coup? Nothing. Even the first Ukrainian government at the time was out of legally elected members of Ukrainian parliament, majority of it anyways. Why would you call it a coup? If President of United States will run away, I won't say he will run away to Russia, but let's say to Canada, and dump United States and his people who elected him, what, United States supposed to sit and cry? No. There are procedures, they're gonna elect someone else, or gonna be vice president, or whatever, they have procedures in their country. So was the Ukraine, and they had legal elections. And as I say, two ultra-right parties on those elections didn't make even 2%, even together. Both parties combined. So Ukraine has a legal government, elected by Ukrainian people, and why in the world you will call it a coup? I don't know if Mr. Rosenberg knows that situation, or doesn't, or he just behaving like a journalist trying to ask questions, not to get sucked into discussion, which is probably a smart thing to do. But it's a wrong thing to do when you're talking to Russian propagandists, because Russian people taking your responsiveness as a weakness. And Mr. Lavrov right now will raise his voice, he will try to intimidate the British journalist, and in Russia and people who admire bullies, it will look like Mr. Lavrov is stronger and he has something to say and he is right. It's not. If you yell at person something, it doesn't mean you're telling the truth, it just means you cannot have a decent conversation, you bully. And you have to be put on your place. And the place of Mr. Lavrov as a war criminal in court in Hague, like a fascist.
В селе Ягодное Черниговской области российские военные 28 дней удерживали 360 человек, в том числе 74 ребенка и 5 людей с инвалидностью в подвале школы, без туалета, без воды. 10 пожилых людей умерли. это борьба с нацизмом?
Знаете, к сожалению, и международные чиновники, включая Верховного комиссара по правам человека, включая, к огромному моему сожалению, генерального секретаря ООН и многих других представителей Организации Объединенных Наций, подвержены давлению Запада. И очень часто выступают прокурором тех фейковых новостей, которые распространяет Запад.
То есть, получается, опять Россия белая пушистая, да? То есть...
Нет, Россия не белая, не пушистая. Россия такая, какая она есть. И мы не стыдимся показывать себя такими, какими мы есть.
So, Mr. Lavrov is bullying again. Yeah, we killed all those people, so what? We're not ashamed of it. We're showing who we are. We decided for some reason that we can bully the whole world. And unfortunately, whole United Nations in the cahoots with Ukrainians for some unknown reason. Ukraine is, no offense to Ukrainians, insignificant country, which West didn't even have much to do. Ukraine has way more relationship and trade and everything with Russia than with the Western countries. And all of a sudden, everybody who include United Nations on the side of Ukraine for some reason, against poor Russia. Go, I'm gonna hug them and cry just now. And I'm Russian, Canadian and Russian. I was born in USSR, and I lived through all this propaganda. And one of their main, one of their main way to do it, it's first step is denial. They completely, flatly deny everything. Denial, counterattack, and so on. According to, as I said in my video about propaganda, you could see what Galeotti was writing about it and describing the whole that 5-step plan of Russia, of the propaganda of USSR and Russia. So right now he's not just denying, he's proud of it. He feels like Russia gained some sort of a power over other countries. He is saying that Russia is the big boss of whole world and everybody's supposed to just bend the knee. He not even sorry. If you want, I can provide you the research done by Bellingcat about Bucha, because Russia again was denying that that's Russia who did it. People, civilian people, were killed and shot in the head with their hands tied behind their back. Yet, that, I don't want to use the bad word, man denying it in front of a British journalist and bullying the British journalist to believe that whatever he says is true, this is just disgusting.
А можно я все-таки у вас спрошу, чтобы я понимал политику вашего...
So now, when the journalist asking the question, Mr. Rosenberg asking a question, trying to find out, so who you are the bully who thinking they can get away with everything, whatever they want? Now, watch what Lavrov is doing. He started to ask questions of the journalist. The interview doesn't work that way. The person came to take your interview, he wants to hear your position. That's why he's asking you questions. But now, this is the second step. After denial, he got counterattack. So, Lavrov was counter-attacking and started to put pressure on the British journalist. I wouldn't go too much into details of this particular thing, and I skip a little bit of the video because we will never end this interview. It's basically I can contradict on every word Lavrov is saying, and I have facts to prove that he's lying. So now Lavrov trying to attack not just journalists of BBC, but BBC itself. And now he's saying the aim of the operation to protect the rights of Russians, that for 8 years
русских, которые в течение 8 лет грубо игнорировались, не только Киев.
Yeah, they were completely and rudely ignored, as he said in Russian. Not only by Kiev regime, but the entire Western civilized world. Wow, what he even talking about? how they were ignored. Russia was the one who didn't want to complain in United Nations to protect these people. Besides, they shouldn't be them anyways. They should not be Russian Crimea or Donetsk or Lugansk, which I just explained you why.
Отказывалась выполнять Минск.
And again, he remembers about Minsk agreements. What Minsk agreements? If Putin and Lavrov would realize the Budapest agreement, then Ukraine wouldn't have war, would she? That's just completely insane.
25 февраля сказал: берите власть в свои руки. Похоже, нам с вами будет легче договориться, чем с этой шайкой наркоманов и неонацистов, которые засела в Киеве. Это...
Russian president made a call for military uprising in Ukraine. He not only invaded somebody else's country, he wanted Ukrainian army turned onto its own government. I can say the same thing. Russian people, if you're listening to me and you know English, I'll make a video in Russian as well. You already have weapons in the hands, which many Russians don't. Turn it against your own commanders, turn it against Putin, help Ukrainians get their freedom back, get your freedom in Russia. So it's okay for Putin to say, but it's not okay for me to say. Right now, I would be considered in Russia extremist, and I will go to jail for 15 years. And for Putin, it's okay thing to say. No big deal.
Звучит как прямой призыв к военному мятежу, нет?
Нет, это звучит как прямой призыв выполнять свой воинский долг, а не служить нацистам.
Again, he's lying about Nazis. I can say the same thing about Russia. The people in Russian army, you give your oath to Russia, not to Putin, who is main Nazis on the planet basically right now. So you have to fulfill your military oath. I can agree with Mr. Lavrov on that, and not to serve Nazis like Lavrov and Putin.
Которые отменяют все, что не нравится их режиму, включая русское образование, русскую культуру, русский...
Oh, about Russian culture and Russian media and Russian education. Whether there are Ukrainians who live in Russia. I would like to know from Mr. Lavrov, is there schools in Russia who has Ukrainian language as a foreign language? I don't think so. Even in USSR, maybe there was, I hardly remember if there was one school in the whole country who had Ukrainian language. I don't think it did, except the schools in Ukraine. Some of them had Ukrainian language, but it wasn't the main language for sure. In Ukrainian, when Ukraine was part of USSR. Where is Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian media, or any media for that matter, foreign media in Russia? That's a good question to ask Mr. Rosenberg. Why wouldn't you ask Mr. Lavrov how many foreign media in Russia? I would tell you, none. And even the journalists in Russia, anybody who is against Putin, they either already left the country, like people who have a popular politics channel, or they're in jail, like opposition leader Navalny. So who would have been talking about Russian culture and Russian media? As I say, people in Ukraine, some of them dying for that country, they don't even know Ukrainian.
Средства массовой информации. Вот BBC там не отменили, потому что вы не скрываете правду.
Oh, BBC isn't banned in Ukraine, but it's banned in Russia. There is no BBC left Russia as far as I know. And so every other news, basically. Where are the foreign news in Russia? Can, for instance, foreign minister of Ukraine talk to Russian people? Like Lavrov just now talking to BBC? I don't think so.
На Украине. О том, что там происходило 8 лет. Я вот вас спросил, ездили ли вы или кто-то из ваших...
No point to listen to him. Now is a good question.
И он даже добавил, на нашу долю тоже выпало возвращать и укреплять. Вот я хочу вас спросить, сколько еще территорий? Какие территории вы собираетесь?
That's a really good question.
Президент все сказал, мне тут добавить нечего.
President has already said everything. Basically, Russia can take whatever she wants. That was very significant what Putin said about Peter the Great. This is the real reason of the war in Ukraine, because Putin wanted to be a Tsar who is attaching land to Russia. If you listen to Putin long enough, you will find out lots of things. This is one of them. So this is the reason. It's obviously not the Nazis, which, as I proved to you, there is not Nazis in Ukraine. It's obviously not defending Russian-speaking people, because they're bombing the very cities where the most of Russian population, like Mariupol, like Kharkov, and many others. It's not about NATO, as I proved it to you, because NATO didn't increase their forces in Europe. It was reducing it. So what's then? And when the Sweden and Finland decided to join NATO, and all of a sudden it isn't a problem, which the border with Finland is over 1,000 kilometers. That would be huge border with a NATO country. Apparently, according to Putin, it's no big deal. So everything what they say about the reasons for the war will lie. Except that now when Putin compares himself to Peter the Great, well, yeah, he wants to attach lands to Russia without asking Ukrainians. People of Mariupol 120 days ago was going to school, to work, they was living normal life in the beautiful city of Mariupol. Now it's a bunch of ruins. And people, lots of people dead, and lots of people fled. And no, it was just one city. So many cities in Ukraine just destroyed by the war criminals like Lavrov and Putin. So Lavrov doesn't answer in this question either.
А во-вторых, я вам еще раз скажу, вы пытаетесь забывать все, что...
Oh yeah, the Western people trying to forget. Why wouldn't he remember why the war even started? Yeah, President Macron said we shouldn't talk to Russia and we shouldn't humiliate Russia, but it was said in the beginning of the war. And I could have agreed with it, for Putin could save his face and back up when it was like 3 days of the war and not many people was hurt or dead. Yet, now it's too late. And it's too late because Russia will never leave Ukraine alone. They would never forgive the lost, what they have. And it would be only delayed war. And as Mr. Podolyak, the representative of Ukraine, representative of the President of Ukraine said, for Ukraine, nobody will invest in the country which is in a delayed kind of war. That's why Russia, in the first place, didn't take Donetsk and Lugansk republics to be part of Russia. They wanted an open conflict. Because the countries with open territorial conflict cannot join NATO according to NATO rules. So that is why they didn't attach those, like Crimea, they didn't attach it to Russia at the time, didn't make it part of Russia, they just wanted open conflict. And that's why they was keep supporting weapons to those people, keep supporting advisors in Donetsk and Lugansk republics to making unrest in somebody else's country. Would, for instance, United States, like if Canada will supporting troops to state Washington and Oregon, trying to make them separate from United States and join Canada, or just separate from United States? I don't think so.
Сейчас президент Франции Макрон сказал, мы должны разговаривать с Россией, мы не должны унижать русских. А знаете, кто ему ответил? Министр иностранных дел Чехии, какой-то там господин Липавский. Он сказал, что Макрон ничего не понимает, подразумевая, что русских надо унижать.
So, right now he talking in derogatory manner about Czech Republic, representative of Czech Republic. He's saying, somewhat Czech Republic, well, who knows what Czech Republic even is? Maybe it's not even a country in his opinion, kind of like Putin said Ukraine isn't a country. So basically, this is bully in front of you, liar, corrupted man and bully, who thinking that there are kings and there is nobody. And Russia is supposed to be a king for some unknown reason. The country who has less than 2% in world economy, whose pensioners are starving, who is now murdering people in other country, the country ruled by dictator, the country with death of journalists, about like I think third in the world or something like that, when there is no independent journalism in Russia, period. And he keeps saying that fake news. The term fake news used Hitler. And Hitler's excuses Russia has to start the war in Ukraine in the first place. So who is the Nazi here? I believe Russia is a Nazi, Lavrov is a Nazi, and Putin is a Nazi. And they are war criminals, which, in my opinion, the court's supposed to prove their guilt, of course. But they have to be investigated for war crimes. And this video should be one of the evidence of war crimes committed by this man. I won't talk about the British and Moroccan soldiers captured in Ukraine, because I have a special video about that, separate video. So, in 2 words, these people were not mercenaries, they were part of Ukrainian army, even before the war, some of them. So, before the invasion, I mean in February. So, there is no question about it, that Russia is behind it. There is no point to talk to those 2 republics about these people, and they are not criminals. They were not mercenaries. They were Ukrainian army. So the Geneva Convention is applicable to them. Period. Again, Lavrov is lying.
Комбатантами. Поэтому что у вас в глазах, поле для маневра в этих отношениях? Потому что и Джонсон, и Трасс заявляют публично, мы должны победить Россию, мы должны поставить...
Well, they talk about Russia on its knees. I'm already sick of hearing this. This is a totally Russian idea that the West's supposed to put Russia on their knees. Russia stand on their knees by themselves, in front of Putin and bowing to him. Nobody, Mr. Lavrov, care about Russia. Russia, as people in the West saying, it's a gas station with nukes. The influence of Russia in the world is insignificant. If it wouldn't be threatening with nukes and started the war, nobody care. It's only Putin's propaganda, always for decades scaring Russian people, the West gonna come and get us. It's useless lie. Western countries would be happy to have Russia as a democratic country where they can do business with, where they can make money with, which they can have markets to sell their products. And about defeat Russia, I believe they might have said that, because this is the only way to stop the war in Ukraine and stop Putin from keep attacking other countries. While Putin is in power, there is no conversation could be between Ukraine and Russia, period. Because Putin is lying all the time, there is no point of taking him by word and say, yeah, I signed an agreement and I'm not gonna go further. It's useless waste of time of everybody. Besides, Zelensky was going to go on a whole bunch of, in the beginning of the war, President Ukraine Zelensky was going to even say, I'm not going to join NATO. Did Putin stop the war? No. Because for Putin, it's not about, as I say, it's not about NATO, it's not about Russian-speaking people. He wants to get land. The more the better. If he get whole Ukraine, even if imagine that miracle that he get all Ukraine on the silver platter, he wouldn't stop. He will go to next countries after that. The people should learn history. See what Hitler did. The pleasing dictators never work.
Пытается в очередной раз принести в жертву свои интересы своего народа амбициям политиков, которые думают только о следующем.
Wow. I can't believe this. He talking about United Kingdom? That the country not worry about interest of their people? And we can hear it from Russia? Who just now invaded Ukraine for no reason and murdering a bunch of Russian people? I heard the numbers up to over 30,000 Russians died there. Multiply it by 3 or 5 and you will receive wounded people. It's just Russians. Absolutely for no reason, whole bunch of people murdered by Putin because of his own idea. And yeah, Russian dictators don't have to think about next election. Why bother? They already can rig it as much as they want. That's how Putin get into power last time. And partly by assassinating his political opponents. There is no opposition in Russia. Putin didn't allow it to happen.
следующих выборах и больше ни о чем.
Вы критикуете страны, ну как Великобритания, да, которые поставляют оружие Киеву, да? Но кто больше виноват в этом? То есть страны, которые поставляют оружие стране, которая защищает свою землю, Украину.
Excellent
Или
question.
страна, которая напала на Украину.
Как она защищает свою землю, когда она бомбит своих граждан?
And where is the proof of that? Where is the shred of proof that Ukraine bombed its own cities? There is no proof. Russia attacked the Ukraine and Russia bombed its cities. So any words of Lavrov, you just flip 180 degrees and he's talking about Russia. That's what Russia did. Only he trying to pretend that it's other countries did.
Я вам еще раз напоминаю, Зеленский в сентябре сказал, кто хочет думать по-русски и считает себя русским, пусть проводит.
That we already discussed.
Донецка, Краматорска и других населенных пунктов в Англии. Здесь-то в это наверняка наблюдается.
Я здесь почти 30 лет в России, да, я объехал страну. И в селах, в городах, где я побывал, знаете, какую фразу я слышал чаще всего? Лишь бы не было войны. Лишь бы не было войны. Я понимаю, что ваша страна пострадала от войны, ужасно пострадала. И поэтому не укладывается в голове, что ваша страна завязала войну против Украины и начала войну в Европе. Я не понимаю, почему. Вот зачем это нужно было, чтобы погубить Украину и будущее вашей страны?
Я услышал вас, да. А у вас укладывается в голове тот политический курс, который Киев проводил последние 10 лет, на отмену всего русского?
He keeps walking in circles. What banning everything Russian? Russian language people freely speak in Ukraine. There is no problem with any of this. But even if it's true, if in Russian language they decided to ban, because Russia was the empire, Russia was choking Ukraine. Now Ukraine is an independent country and they can put any language in their country they please. It's not a reason to murder them and exterminate them, is it?
Укладывается в голове.
And now Mr. Lavrov talking in a derogatory way with an English journalist. He not just say, can you understand that? He said, can you get it into your head? In a way like, are you dumb or something?
Считаете, что если не будет, лишь бы не было войны, означает унижение, возможность.
Who humiliating Russia? Like, I don't understand even what he's talking about. If you look at the United Nations, why United Nations is a useless organization? Because Russia has the right of veto. And Russia using that right more than world leader United States. What humiliation we talking about? We not because the West doesn't accept Russia as smart country who doing smart things. They have rights to do that. I just told you because why? Because Russia is a dictatorship, because Russia has weak economy, Russia doesn't do anything good on international arena, Canada has more, or Switzerland has more value, like they treat it equally, but I mean the word of Canada mean more in international arena because Canada is smart country and doing smart things on international arena. And Canada doesn't have army, and big army anyways, and yet Canada still respected. Russia doesn't respect it for a reason. And the reason is just because their diplomats are bullies, like Lavrov. You just seen it. So I don't see where Russia got humiliated. When it happened.
Унижение русских, России, как об этом вот говорит министр иностранных дел Чехии, отвечая Макрону.
He still can't forgive the Czech Republic minister. Oh, that is hilarious. It would have been funny if it wouldn't be so sad. He's so insecure that he cannot forgive the person who said the truth, by the way. What saving face we're talking about? After murders of a whole bunch of people on both sides, Russians and Ukrainians alike. We're supposed to save the face of new Hitler? We're supposed to understand him?
об этом-то почему-то никто не разговаривает. Вот вы ухватили то, что вам нужно для вашей...
Now he talking about himself. That's what Russia doing. He cherry pick pieces and use it for his line of logic in his reports and in his speeches. As you clearly saw in this interview, I just pointed out every little thing. Sorry it took out so much time and it looked very long, but I prefer to do one interview, like go into details, so you can see how it's done. This manipulative tactic called cherry picking. And now he tried to blame the opponent. This is one of the tactics as well.
Линии для логики ваших трансляций. Лишь бы не было войны. Да, это...
Yes, that's famous Russian phrase. We must avoid the war.
Но в русском народе также...
So now the war is already there. What now? Russia really wanted to give up everything, personal freedoms, money they have, just for it wouldn't be the war. But now there is a war. And what they trying to tell Russian people? For the pride, national pride, or personal pride of Putin, they have to invade independent country. Ukraine is independent country, which was squashed by Russia for many years. During Tsar time, during Soviet time. And now what? Now Russians trying to have to go murder them? And it's excusable?
Пытаются лишить всех русских на Украине при вашей поддержке. Вот и все.
That is pretty much it. As you clearly could see, the position of Mr. Lavrov is undefendable. It just, Mr. Rosenberg didn't push hard enough, in my opinion. That is why he looked meek and weak, even he did ask the right questions. Dealing with propagandists, you have to stop them almost in every word. If they're lying to you, if they use manipulative tactics, foreign journalists supposed to be a little bit more aggressive, in my opinion. Because otherwise, if to show that interview in Russia, and I really appreciate that Mr. Rosenberg speaking Russian, and he speak it well, and asking the right questions, in Russia he would look like a weak person, who either doesn't know the information enough, or just allowed himself to be bullied by Mr. Lavrov, which is during the interview Lavrov raised his voice to the British journalist a few times, trying to push him. So this is not the way how people supposed to behave, like every person, let alone politician, let alone diplomat, let alone the Minister of Foreign Affairs of nuclear country. This is embarrassment. And I'll provide you all the information I promised you. And the last thing I want to add to this story, if the Western countries, especially United Kingdom, is so bad and horrible and nasty and supporting horrible regimes and awful in every way, why exactly Mr. Lavrov or Mr. Putin and lots of Putin's oligarchs has their families, their lovers, their children living in these countries and having properties in there, like daughter of a lover of Mr. Lavrov, Polina Kovaleva, who he bought an apartment in UK, in London, in Kensington, for £4.4 million, for example. Luckily she got under the sanctions now, as many other people, and Putin's yacht, at least one of them, get taken away. So if these countries would have been so bad, why Mr. Lavrov and his families, two families, don't live in Russia? Why his daughters, and so is Putin's daughters, don't go to the war in Ukraine? Women fighting too. Let's not discriminate women, please. I'm a woman myself, and where are the children of Russian oligarchs or Russian any big authorities in Russia fighting in the war? By the way, when Britain was fighting the war in Falkland Islands, the son of Her Majesty the Queen was fighting there. The prince. Yet none of the children of the Russian oligarchs or Putin's daughters or Lavrov's daughters fight in there. And they don't live in Donbass. They don't live in any areas nearby to Ukrainian border. They live in London. They live in other countries, but not in Russia. That is why sanctions are hurting them. So I propose put more sanctions on Russian oligarchs, on Lavrov personally, on Putin and their families. And please help to stop the war in Ukraine, at least by stop admiring pieces of garbage like Lavrov and Putin, who is lying to you and trying to disturb the life in your country. Meanwhile, he prefers to live in Britain. His stepdaughter basically lives in Britain. Yet he's saying foreign countries are so bad. Anyway, this is the information I wanted to share with you. Thank you for being with me for that long, and thank you very much. Please educate yourself. And have a good day or evening, whatever time you have right now. Thank you. Here's the article of Wall Street Journal. This is the information about how countries reduced presence of NATO and defense spending in 2013, for instance. I'll give the link to the article so you can see it for yourself. Especially this is very interesting. This is what I was talking to you about, the International Russian Conservative Forum. That's what I was talking to you about. Unfortunately, this article is in Russian. So basically it was international conference of representatives of conservative and nationalistic movements and parties of other countries. And this is the article from March 19, 2015, Stop the International Russian Conservative Forum. And he is talking about the countries and the parties which came to Russia. They were paid by Russian government actually to came to Russia and for their accommodation out of Russian taxpayers' money. So basically ultra-right, nationalistic and Nazis parties of other countries where they were taught in Russia how to disrupt the life in their own country. This is another article about that from 2015 in New York Times, March 22nd, 2015. You're welcome to check this out as well. That's the interview to the TV channel ARD, German TV channel, interview of Putin from August 30th, 2008. Unfortunately, the interview is in Russian, so I have to translate to you a little bit. This is what Putin was thinking about Ukraine and Crimea in 2008.
Председатель ЕС господин Кушнер выразил недавно озабоченность, что следующим конфликтом может быть Украина, а именно Крым и Севастополь как база российского военно-морского флота.
The journalist asking Putin a question. I think the French representative of French government was asking that the France is concerned that the next area of conflict could be Ukraine and Russian base in Sevastopol, which Crimea was part of Ukraine and still is in opinion of the world, except Russia think otherwise, but that's what Putin think about that.
Является ли Крым и Севастополь такой целью для России? Вы сказали следующий.
Is the Crimea or Sevastopol is the next target for Russia?
Цели. У нас не было и здесь никакой цели. Поэтому считаю, говорить о какой-то следующей цели некорректно. Это первое.
Putin is arguing that the journalist said would it be the next target? He's saying next because Russia was had conflict in Southern Ossetia and Abkhazia, which territories of Georgia Russia grabbed to itself earlier. And Putin is arguing that you dare to call it the next target. Even Georgia and even Southern Ossetia and Abkhazia wasn't our target.
Вы это исключаете.
And the journalist said, "Do you excluding such a thing? It's not possible that next target would be Ukraine." Putin is arguing that there was not target before, even in Georgia, and of course Ukraine not gonna be next target.
То вы будете удовлетворены. То будете удовлетворены.
I think if you let me answer the question, you will be
Крым не
satisfied.
является никакой спорной территорией.
Crimea is not a disputed territory.
Там не было никакого этнического конфликта, в отличие
There was no ethnic conflict in Crimea. I'm quoting Putin. I'm translating what he's saying exactly.
от конфликта между Южной Осетией и Грузией.
It's not like in Southern Ossetia and Georgia, which, according to Putin, has conflict, ethnic conflict. Ukraine, he said, is not. It doesn't have ethnic conflict.
И Россия давно признала границы сегодняшней Украины.
Russia long ago said that we realized these are Ukrainian borders. At the time, Crimea, I reminding you, was part, and it still is. It just now Russia thinking it's part of Russia. But Crimea was part of Ukraine, and Putin is saying that Russia completely agreed with Ukrainian borders, and there is no question about it.
По сути, закончили в целом и в общем наши переговоры по границе. Речь идет о демаркации, но это же технические дела.
We finished our conversations about borders. There is some markings of the borders, but this is a technical detail, but we solved, there is no problems with the borders of Ukraine.
Вопрос о каких-то подобных целях для России, считаю, отдает провокационным смыслом.
Putin thinking that the question even about Russians' intentions about Ukraine is like provocation.
Там внутри общества в Крыму происходит сложный процесс. Проблема крымских татар.
There are some problems within the Crimean society, like Crimean Tatars, Ukrainians, Russians have some issues between themselves within Ukraine.
Украинского населения, русского населения, вообще славянского населения.
Slavic
Но это
people in general.
внутриполитическая проблема самой Украины.
But this is internal political problem of Ukraine.
У нас есть договор с Украиной по поводу пребывания нашего флота до 2017 года.
We have agreement with Ukraine, so Russian fleet will stay in Sevastopol or Ukraine until 2017.
И мы будем руководствоваться этими соглашениями.
And we will act accordingly with these agreements.
Другой министр иностранных дел, на этот раз Великобритании, господин Милибанд, в последнее время высказал некоторые опасения о том, что начинается новая холодная война.
So that's what I wanted to tell you about that. I quoted Putin, translated him as best as I could. So you can look for the original interview, probably would be in German and in English. I didn't find it. This one was on Russian TV channel. So even on Russian TV channel, Putin says that Ukraine, the borders of Ukraine, he agreed with, and Crimea is a part of Ukraine. There is no question about it.